Our interview tonight relates to the early Mormon blood atonement teaching. Brigham Young said there are sins that men commit for which they cannot receive forgiveness in this world or in that which is to come. And if they had their eyes open to see their true condition, they would be perfectly willing to have their blood spilt upon the ground. And then he goes on to say, it is true that the blood of the Son of God was shed for sins, yet men can commit sins which it can never remit, but they must be atoned for by the blood of the man. This was a sermon that was printed in the Deseret News in 1856. Now, he's saying that Jesus' blood will take care of some sins. But he's saying there are some sins that only the blood of the sinner will atone for. Because of these teachings of the early Mormons, self-proclaimed prophets like Ervil LeBaron began taking out his own enemies in cold-blooded murder, and he used his own people and the control that he had over their minds to do these things. He had them commit the blood atonement acts for him. One of those people was Rena Shanoth. She is the woman who pulled the trigger of the gun that killed the prophet of the Allred group, the Apostolic United Brethren, Reuel Allred, and killed him because Ervil LeBaron had sent her for that blood atonement task. In April, when the YFZ Ranch rescue attempt took place, myself and a good friend of mine, Susan Schmidt, went down to El Dorado, and we spent 8 days down there, and I had the privilege of meeting Rena Shanoth while I was there. Rena is a beautiful, sweet, kind, quiet woman who glows with the love of God within her. And I want you to know that Rena, who shot Reuel Allred, has Jesus Christ as her Savior. She's been forgiven, and she knows she's been forgiven because she's turned to Him alone. I contacted Rena after we began doing our Thursday night shows, and I asked her if she's ever in the Salt Lake area, would she come on and be a guest on the program? Rena graciously declined and said, no, I don't do personal interviews anymore. I understand why, and so I didn't push her for it, but she did say that she has a friend and a relative who knows so much about her and her own personal story that if we wanted to do an interview for Rena or with Rena, we could do it by proxy. And so we've decided to do that. It's taken a lot of time to think about and plan. And so we have decided to do a proxy interview, and Susan Schmidt is the one that we're going to interview on Rena's behalf. Susan is a friend of Rena's and also her cousin. They were both raised in the LeBaron polygamy group down in Mexico, and so we are going to interview Susan on behalf of Rena. And so, Susan, yes, would you please, for the sake of those who maybe are not familiar with Rena's story or even the LeBaron story, would you kind of give us a brief outline of how you know her, how the Shanoffs and your family got into the LeBaron group, and and bring us up to where we can start asking you the questions?
Okay, sounds good. Yes, Rena and I, we were both raised in the colonial LeBaron colony, in Joel LeBaron's church, which was called the Church of the Firstborn of the Fullness of Times.
Yeah.
So she was 16 when Ervil, through his man Dan Jordan, who was the man that was the trigger in Joel LeBaron's death, he told Dan to tell Rena that it was time for her to make a choice and to marry him. He wanted her to marry him that very night, that Dan was going to perform the ceremony, and that Rena needed to make that decision to marry him that very night, or she would go directly to hell. Ervil told his group, with Rena in the room, that he'd had another revelation about who was to be killed to flush Verlin out into the open so that they could get to Verlin. And the man that they were was to be killed was a rival polygamist leader His name was Rulon Allred, and Rena told me that that was the first time she'd ever heard that name.
Okay.
And that God had let Ervil know that the two prettiest women in their group were to be the ones that took this man out.